I'm Dara Mitchell, 29, and about to face my estranged family after 5 long years. Tonight, they're gathering at Maison, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, to celebrate my sister Heather's engagement. They've always judged my career choices, dismissed my culinary dreams as beneath our family name. Little do they know how much has changed since I walked away. My stomach knots as I straighten my simple black dress. Sometimes the hardest reservations to make are with your own past. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who should have believed in you from the start. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut meant something very specific in my family. The Mitchells weren't just wealthy, we were a legacy. My parents, Margaret and Richard Mitchell, built their identities around status markers, the right address, the right schools, the right professions. Our sprawling colonial home hosted fundraisers where my mother would parade us children around like accessories, her pride directly proportional to how well we fit into her vision of success. The Mitchell children are destined for greatness, she'd tell her friends at garden parties, while my father nodded approvingly behind his whiskey tumbler. Heather's already set on Yale Law, and Ethan shows such promise in mathematics. He'll make an excellent investment banker. When guests would inevitably turn to me, the middle child, my mother's smile would tighten almost imperceptibly. Dara has creative inclinations. She'll find her way. What she meant was that I was the family disappointment. While Heather excelled at debate club and Ethan won math competitions, I spent hours in our housekeeper Elena's domain, the kitchen. Elena, a warm-hearted woman from Greece, recognized something in me that my parents couldn't. Genuine passion. "You have the hands for this work," she'd say as I helped her knead bread dough or precisely dice vegetables. "The way you taste, the way you smell, you understand food in your soul." By 13, I was creating my own recipes. By 16, I was hosting underground dinner parties for my friends when my parents traveled. The kitchen became my sanctuary, the place where I felt most authentically myself. "Cooking is servant's work," my father declared when I mentioned culinary school during my junior year of high school. Mitchell's hire chefs, they don't become them. To appease them, I applied to business schools, eventually attending Dartmouth, where my father and grandfather had gone. But even there, I found ways to nurture my true passion, taking food science electives and nutrition courses that I could justify as complementary to business administration. I started an underground supper club in my apartment, charging students for innovative 5-course meals to fund my secret weekend workshops with local chefs. My double life continued until graduate school. I was 6 months into an MBA program that made me profoundly unhappy when Chef Laurent Bissett, a French culinary master with 3 Michelin stars, visited campus for a lecture series. After tasting my food at a university reception I had helped cater, he pulled me aside. "Who taught you to make a reduction like this?" he asked, his accent thick but his eyes serious. "I taught myself," I admitted. "From books, videos, experimenting." He handed me his card. "You are wasting your talent here. Come to my kitchen in New York. I will make you great." That night changed everything. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' immaculate living room, explaining why I was dropping out of my MBA program to attend culinary school. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. "This is absolutely unacceptable," my father finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We've invested everything in your education." "Everything except respect for what I actually want," I countered. My mother's face hardened. "If you pursue this hobby, you do it without our support, financial or otherwise." Heather, home from her first year of law school, laughed coldly. "Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage." Ethan, already working at a prestigious financial firm, simply looked embarrassed for me. I left that night with nothing but my personal savings and a small suitcase. The next 5 years were harder than anything I'd known, working 18-hour days, living in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, taking out loans for culinary school. But under Chef Lauren's mentorship, I thrived. The kitchen's intensity, the discipline, the creativity, it fed something in me that business school never could. And then came the opportunity that would change everything. An investor who had tasted my food at one of Lauren's events approached me about a business proposal. 2 years ago, Maison opened its doors with me as executive chef and partial owner. 6 months after that, I bought out my partners to become sole proprietor. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd ended up using my business education after all, just not in the way my parents had intended. Maison quickly became the hardest reservation to get in the city. Last month, Food and Wine magazine featured us in their Future of American Cuisine issue. Through all of this, I maintained my distance from my family. Occasional stilted phone calls with my mother, holiday cards, but nothing substantial. They knew I was doing something with food, but nothing about my actual success. I kept it that way intentionally. I wanted recognition for my accomplishments on my own terms, not as a way to finally earn their approval. So when the embossed invitation to Heather's engagement dinner arrived at my apartment, I was surprised. Even more shocking was the location, my own restaurant. Of course, they couldn't know it was mine. They probably chose it because it was exclusive and impressive, perfect for showcasing their status. After days of deliberation, I decided to accept. Not to seek validation, but perhaps to finally close a chapter. 5 years of distance had given me perspective. I was secure enough in my success now to face them without crumbling under their judgment. What I hadn't anticipated was how it would feel to watch them dine in my establishment, criticizing the very dishes I had poured my heart into creating. But that was exactly what awaited me as I pushed open the heavy glass doors of Maison that evening, ready to play the role of the struggling black sheep one last time. The familiar scent of Maison enveloped me as I stepped through the doors: saffron, reduced wine, the subtle perfume of fresh herbs that I insisted on having delivered twice daily. Usually, this aroma centered me, reminded me of everything I'd built. Tonight, it only intensified my anxiety. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a simple black dress that was actually Diane von Furstenberg, accessorized with a single strand of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. Understated elegance that my status-conscious family would likely misread as trying too hard with limited means. My hair was pulled back into a sleek chignon, another detail they would probably interpret as me not being able to afford a proper styling. Marcus, my most senior server, spotted me immediately. His eyes widened slightly in question. I rarely came in through the front entrance as a guest. I gave him a subtle shake of my head and mouthed, "Not yet." He nodded discreetly and continued with his duties. From the entryway, I could already see them. They had requested the center table, of course they had, and were arranged like a tableau of affluence. My mother in Chanel, my father examining the wine list with exaggerated concentration, Heather draped in what looked like new season Gucci. Next to her sat a man I didn't recognize, Bradley, presumably, with slicked-back hair and a watch that caught the light every time he moved his wrist. Ethan and his wife Allison completed the picture, both in business attire as though they'd come straight from important meetings. Celeste, my hostess, approached with a warm smile. "Good evening, Ms." She caught herself just in time. "Your party is already seated. May I show you to their table?" "Thank you, Celeste," I murmured, appreciating her discretion. As we approached, my mother noticed me first. Her eyes performed the quick assessment I remembered from childhood. A head-to-toe scan that calculated the approximate value of my appearance and found it wanting. "Dara," she said, rising to air-kiss my cheeks. "You've finally arrived. We were beginning to wonder." "I'm exactly on time, Mother," I replied, checking my watch. 7:30 on the dot. My father stood, giving me a stiff hug that ended with an awkward pat on the back. "You look healthy," he offered, which in Mitchell speak meant I hadn't maintained the borderline unhealthy slenderness prized in our social circle. Heather barely bothered to stand, offering her cheek for me to kiss. "This is Bradley," she announced, as her fiancé rose and extended his hand. His grip was too firm, a power move I recognized from countless business meetings. Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, he introduced himself. "Just made junior partner at Goldman. No, nice to meet you," or "I've heard about you." Just credentials and status, the Mitchell family love language. Ethan gave me a more genuine greeting, though his wife Allison's smile seemed strained. I later learned she'd been the one tasked with finding this impressively exclusive restaurant for tonight's dinner, and she was nervous about whether it would meet everyone's standards. "Well," my mother said as I took the last empty seat, "we've already ordered champagne. I hope that's acceptable." I noticed they'd chosen the second most expensive option on our list, showy but not reckless. Typical. Around us, the restaurant hummed with the energy I'd worked so hard to cultivate. The lighting was dim enough for intimacy, but bright enough to appreciate the artful plating of each dish. The sound level perfectly balanced conversation and privacy. The tables were spaced just so, close enough to create energy, far enough apart for discretion. Every detail had been my decision, from the linen weight to the custom-designed chairs that encouraged diners to linger without becoming uncomfortable. I watched the staff's subtle reactions as they realized I was sitting with guests. Jose, our sommelier, caught my eye as he approached with the champagne. The slightest raise of his eyebrow asked if I wanted him to acknowledge me. I gave an imperceptible shake of my head. "Excellent choice," he said to my father instead, presenting the bottle with practiced elegance before beginning to pour. "We're celebrating an engagement," my father announced unnecessarily, clearly hoping for special treatment. "Congratulations," Jose replied smoothly. "Maison is honored to host such a special occasion." "I'm surprised you managed a reservation," I said innocently. "I've heard it's quite difficult." Bradley leaned forward. "I know people," he said with a wink so smug I had to suppress an eye roll. "Called in a favor with a client who's friendly with the management." I bit my tongue. The client was likely Craig Winters, one of our regular investors who occasionally requested tables for business associates. I made a mental note to speak with him about Bradley. "Well, aren't you resourceful?" I murmured, raising my champagne flute. "To Heather and Bradley," my father declared. "A perfect match and a brilliant future." We clinked glasses, and I took a small sip, noting that the champagne was served at the precise temperature I had trained my staff to maintain. "So," my mother began, setting down her glass and fixing me with her attention. "Tell us what you've been up to these past few years. You've been so mysterious." The table's focus shifted to me, 5 pairs of eyes evaluating, ready to judge. "I've been working in food," I said simply. "Learning, growing." Still with that cooking phase, Heather sighed, as though I'd admitted to a regrettable addiction. "I thought surely by now you'd have moved on to something more substantial." "Not everyone can handle the corporate path," Ethan added, managing to make his defense sound like criticism. Bradley looked confused. "What exactly do you do? Line cook? Catering?" "Various roles," I answered vaguely. "I've worn many hats." "Well, we're just glad you're managing to support yourself," my mother said with the fake graciousness I knew so well. "Though we've always said our door is open if things get too challenging." I noticed Jessica, one of our most experienced servers, approaching with the amuse-bouche, a bite-sized sphere of compressed watermelon topped with fermented black garlic and a microgreen I had sourced from a specialized urban farm. "Compliments of the kitchen," she announced, carefully placing one before each diner. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flash of loyalty before she slipped back into professional mode. "Is this all?" Heather asked, examining the single bite with disappointment. "I'm famished." "It's an amuse-bouche," I explained. "A palate opener. The meal hasn't actually started yet." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, Dara," she snapped. "I'm not culturally illiterate just because I chose law instead of playing with food." I watched as they each tasted my creation. My mother took the smallest possible bite, ever conscious of calories. My father popped the whole thing in his mouth, barely pausing to taste it. Ethan and Allison at least seemed to appreciate it, while Bradley made a show of analyzing the flavors like a wine connoisseur, using terms that made no culinary sense. Only Heather left hers untouched. "I don't do raw garlic," she declared. Though the black garlic was far from raw, it had been fermented for 60 days in a temperature-controlled environment, a process I had perfected after 3 years of experimentation. As our server cleared the plates, I caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes at Heather's untouched creation. In that moment, I felt protective. Not of myself, but of my staff who took such pride in our work. I had built Maison not just as a restaurant, but as a family of sorts, one bound by shared passion rather than DNA. The evening was just beginning, but already I could feel the old dynamic settling in. I was the outsider, the one who had chosen the wrong path, whose choices needed justification. But unlike the Dara of 5 years ago, I now sat at this table with a secret strength, one that would soon turn this entire dynamic on its head. "So tell us about the wedding plans," I said, deliberately shifting attention back to Heather as our first course arrived, a delicate composition of heirloom tomatoes, house-made ricotta, and basil oil that had taken me months to perfect. Heather brightened immediately. "We've booked St. Thomas Church, of course. Reception at the plaza. For 100 guests, though Mother thinks we should cut it to 350. "The guest list is getting unwieldy," my mother interjected. "The Astor Williams aren't speaking to the Bennetts since that unfortunate yacht incident, so we can't seat them in the same section." I suppressed a smile. The gravity with which they discuss these social calculations never ceased to amaze me. "For 100 seems excessive," I ventured, taking a bite of the tomato dish. Bradley leaned forward. "It's networking, not just celebration. Half those invitations are relationship investments." "Precisely," my father agreed. "Bradley understands the social capital aspect. A wedding of this caliber opens doors." "And what about you, Dara?" Heather asked, her tones suddenly sharp. "Any prospects on your horizon? Or are you still too busy with your cooking?" I noticed she had barely touched her food, pushing the heirloom tomatoes around her plate with obvious disinterest. "I'm focused on my career right now," I answered simply. "Career," Ethan repeated with a small laugh. "Is that what we're calling it?" My mother jumped in. "Dara, dear, surely by 29 you're thinking about settling down. There's that lovely son of Margaret Whitley's, he's in hospital administration, I believe. Very stable. I'm not looking to be set up, Mother." "Well, your options will get more limited with each passing year," she persisted. "Especially in your situation." Before I could respond, our server appeared to clear the first course. I'd barely registered the taste of my own creation, too tense to properly enjoy it. "Is there a problem with the dish?" Jessica asked Heather, noting her nearly full plate. "Too acidic," Heather replied dismissively. "And the tomatoes could have been riper." I'd bit my tongue. Those tomatoes had been selected at their peak that very morning from a farm upstate that grew specifically for us. "I'm so sorry to hear that," Jessica said with practiced diplomacy. "I'll be sure to inform the kitchen." The second course arrived, seared scallops with a brown butter emulsion and pickled ramps, a spring special I was particularly proud of. As the plates were set down, I watched my family's reactions. "Now this looks promising," my father declared, cutting into a scallop with his fork. Bradley swirled his wine, a Sancerre I had personally selected to pair with this course. "Decent wine list here. Not exceptional, but passable." Our sommelier Jose, overhearing this as he passed, shot me a quick glance. I gave him a subtle smile. Jose had been poached from a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris and had turned down offers from establishments around the world to work with me. "So, Dara," Allison began, clearly trying to include me. "Ethan mentioned you're working in food, but you never really specified what exactly you do." Before I could answer, Heather cut in. "She's probably hostessing somewhere. Right, Dara? Using that business degree to seat people and hand out menus." "Actually," I started. "No shame in that," my father interrupted. Everyone has to start somewhere. Though after 5 years, I would have expected some advancement. I've advanced, I said quietly. Into what? Assistant manager at Applebee's? Heather laughed at her own joke. Heather, Ethan warned, showing a rare moment of defense. What? I'm just being realistic. She chose to abandon her education for this passion project. Actions have consequences. I took a sip of wine, allowing the familiar notes to center me. And how is law treating you, Heather? Still at Henderson and Block. Her expression tightened. I'm between positions at the moment, actually. Taking time to plan the wedding. She was working too many hours, Bradley interjected. I told her my wife doesn't need to kill herself at some firm. Once we're married, she can do charity work like my mother. I noticed the flash of something, a resentment? Frustration in Heather's eyes before she smoothed her expression back to placid agreement. The third course arrived, a pasta dish featuring hand-rolled tagliatelle with spring peas, pancetta, and mint. One of our signature dishes that had been featured in Food and Wine. The portion size here is ridiculous, my mother commented, looking at the artfully plated pasta. All this expense for 3 bites. It's about quality over quantity, Mother, I replied. The tasting menu is designed to take you through multiple flavors and textures. In my day, restaurants gave you a proper meal for your money, my father grumbled. This nouvelle cuisine nonsense is just a way to charge more for less food. I watched as Bradley cut into his pasta rather than twirling it, breaking the delicate strands I had rolled by hand that morning. So how exactly are you affording a place like this on a food service salary? Heather asked bluntly. This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I felt all eyes turn to me. I manage my finances carefully, I replied. Oh please, Heather scoffed. A dinner here costs more than you probably make in a day. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this? I'm not dating anyone, I said evenly. Then how can you possibly afford this place? She pressed. Are you in debt? Maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances? Heather, Ethan warned again, looking uncomfortable. No, I want to know, she insisted. We all rearranged our schedules for this dinner that she suggested at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Either she's being financially irresponsible or she's not being honest about her situation. The fourth course arrived, a perfectly cooked duck breast with cherry gastrique and farro. Chef Miranda, who ran the kitchen when I wasn't on the line, had executed it flawlessly. This duck is undercooked, Bradley announced after one bite. I looked at his plate. The duck was a perfect medium rare, exactly as it should be. It's meant to be served that way, I explained. Medium rare is the optimal temperature for duck breast. I prefer my meat well done, he declared, motioning for a server. When Jessica approached, he spoke without looking at her. This is raw. Take it back and cook it properly. I saw the flash of annoyance in Jessica's eyes, quickly masked by professional courtesy. Of course, sir. My apologies. As she took his plate, I caught her eye and gave a slight nod. She would know to have the kitchen prepare a new breast rather than ruining the existing one by overcooking it. Really, Dara, my mother said once Jessica had gone, you still haven't answered Heather's question. How are you affording this dinner? The tension at the table was palpable now. I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I'd had during countless family dinners growing up, the sense of being cornered, judged, and found wanting before I'd even had a chance to speak. But I wasn't that same insecure young woman anymore. I had built something I was proud of, something that was entirely mine. For a moment, I considered revealing everything right then, watching their expressions change as they realized whose restaurant they were sitting in, whose food they had been critiquing so carelessly. Before I could decide, Bradley's overcooked duck returned, now lacking all the tenderness and complexity it had originally possessed. Much better, he declared after one bite, though I could see from across the table that it was now dry and tough. My father signaled for the wine list again. Let's order another bottle. Something more impressive this time. As Jose approached with the leather-bound list, My father made a show of examining it, finally pointing to one of our most expensive options, a Bordeaux priced at over $800. This one should be adequate, he declared. I knew that bottle intimately. I had selected it during a trip to France last year, meeting with the vintner personally. It was spectacular, but completely wrong for the current course and the ones to follow. May I suggest something that might pair better with the remaining dishes? I ventured. My father waved me off. I think I know my wines, Dara. Jose caught my eye, silently asking for direction. I gave him a small nod, let my father have his way. This wasn't the hill to die on. As the evening progressed through the final savory course and into dessert, a deconstructed lemon tart that was one of my personal favorites, the jabs continued. Every dish met with some criticism. Every attempt I made to contribute to the conversation somehow twisted into evidence of my failure. By the time coffee was served, I felt emotionally drained. The double burden of enduring my family's condescension while watching them thoughtlessly critique my life's work was becoming unbearable. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating, the check. Marcus approached with the black leather folder containing the bill, placing it discreetly in the center of the table. My father reached for it immediately, a reflex of patriarchal duty, but Bradley intercepted. Please, Richard, allow me, he said, with the practiced smoothness of someone who has turned even generosity into a power move. Consider it my treat to celebrate the occasion. My father made the expected token protest before acquiescing. I watched as Bradley opened the folder, his expression shifting from confident smile to barely concealed shock as he registered the total. Is there a problem? My father asked, noticing the change. No. Bradley recovered quickly. Just confirming the calculation. I knew exactly what he was looking at. A dinner for 7 with premium wine pairings, special off-menu requests, and that $800 Bordeaux would run well over $3,000. Not outrageous for a restaurant of Maison's caliber, but certainly a statement. He reached for his wallet, extracting a black credit card with deliberate slowness, making sure everyone noticed the exclusive tier. Heather, perhaps sensing his discomfort, chose that moment to circle back to her earlier interrogation. So, Dara, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, you never did explain how you're managing to contribute to this extravagant dinner. We wouldn't want you stretching yourself financially on our account. All eyes turned to me again. I could feel the familiar dynamic asserting itself. Heather the successful one, me the struggling disappointment. I can cover my portion, I said simply. Can you though? She pressed, leaning forward. Because we all know what food service pays. Can you even afford this place? The table fell silent. The question hung in the air, so deliberately insulting that even my parents looked uncomfortable. Heather, my mother murmured, perhaps this isn't. No, I want to know, Heather insisted, eyes locked on mine. We've spent the entire evening pretending that everything's fine, that Dara's choice to throw away her education hasn't left her struggling. I think we deserve some honesty. I felt a hot flush rising from my chest to my face. 5 years of distance, of building my own life and success, and nothing had changed. I was still the family disappointment, still being asked to justify my existence. Bradley, perhaps sensing an opportunity to reassert control after the check shock, joined in. If you need help with your portion, just say so. No shame in that. I don't need help, I said, my voice tight. Then how exactly are you paying for this? Heather demanded. Because a meal here costs more than you probably make in a week. I opened my mouth to respond, to finally reveal everything, when Bradley suddenly frowned at the bill. Wait, there's a mistake here, he announced. They've only charged us for the wines, not the food. He signaled sharply for Marcus. Excuse me, there's an error on our check. Marcus approached our table with perfect timing, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. In reality, he probably had been. My staff knew me well enough to be watching this drama unfold. Is there a problem, sir? He asked. Yes, you've only charged us for the beverages, not the meal, Bradley said, pointing at the bill. Marcus looked at the check, then at me, his expression questioning. In that moment, I made my decision. The charade had gone on long enough. I gave Marcus a slight nod. "There's no error, sir," Marcus said smoothly. "The dinner portion has been taken care of." "By whom?" my father asked, frowning. Marcus turned to me, his professional demeanor giving way to a warm smile. "Welcome back, Ms. Dara. Your usual table is ready for your meeting with the investors. Would you like me to handle the situation first?" The silence that fell over the table was absolute. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me in various stages of confusion and disbelief. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Yes, please close out Mr. Harrington's beverage tab. The rest is on the house, as usual." "Very good, Ms. Dara," he replied, taking the folder from Bradley's now slack grip. "Chef Miranda mentioned she'd like your opinion on the new spring menu items when you have a moment." "I'll stop by the kitchen before my meeting," I assured him. As Marcus departed, I finally looked directly at my family. Their expressions ranged from confusion to shock to the first dawning of understanding. What is happening?" my mother finally managed. I took a deep breath. The moment I had both dreaded and secretly anticipated for 5 years had arrived. "Welcome to Maison," I said simply. "My restaurant." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. My father was the first to recover, his expression shifting from confusion to calculation. "Your restaurant," he repeated carefully. "You work here?" "No, father," I clarified, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I own Maison. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor." "That's impossible," Heather blurted. "This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It's been featured in major magazines." "Yes," I agreed. Food and Wine last month, Bon Appetit before that. The New York Times gave us 4 stars in their review last year." Bradley was staring at me as though I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. But you said you worked in food." "You were vague about everything." "Because I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was struggling," I explained. "And you've all made that abundantly clear tonight." My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls, her go-to gesture when socially destabilized. "Darling, why wouldn't you tell us about this achievement?" The way she emphasized achievement spoke volumes. Success made my choices retroactively acceptable in a way passion alone never could. "Would you like the full story?" I asked, looking around the table. Without waiting for an answer, I continued. "After I left 5 years ago, I moved to the city with what little savings I had. I rented a tiny room in an apartment with 3 roommates in Queens. For the first year, I worked 3 jobs: prep cook at a bistro from 5 a.m. to noon, line cook at a midtown restaurant from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m., and weekend shifts at a bakery. I took a sip of water, noting their uncomfortable expressions. I slept 4 hours a night. I had blisters and burns up and down my arms. I studied technique obsessively in my rare free moments. Chef Laurent, who had initially encouraged me to pursue culinary arts, took me under his wing. I became his sous chef within 18 months. Ethan was watching me with what appeared to be genuine interest. Allison looked impressed. My parents seemed frozen in a state of reassessment. 2.5 years ago, I was working a private event at Lawrence Restaurant. A guest, James Warren of Warren Capital, tried my special course and asked to meet the chef. He was surprised to find someone so young had created what he called the most innovative dish he'd tasted in years. I gestured around us. James became my first investor. We found this space, which was a failed nightclub at the time. I developed the concept, designed the menu, hired the staff, oversaw every detail from the lighting fixtures to the custom plateware. But the cost, my father said, his mind still seemingly stuck on the finances. A restaurant of this caliber in this location, it must have required millions. 3.4 million for the initial investment, I confirmed. James brought in 2 other investors. We opened to immediate acclaim, partly due to Lawrence endorsement and industry connections. 6 months in, we were profitable. 3 months after that, I used the restaurant's success to secure a loan and buy out my investors. I've been sole owner for over a year now. That's why you suggested we meet here, Heather realized, her voice small. You knew all along. Actually, no, I corrected her. Allison chose this restaurant. Isn't that right, Allison? All eyes turned to Ethan's wife, who blushed deeply. I had no idea, Dara. The concierge at Ethan's firm recommended it as the most impressive new restaurant in the city. I swear I didn't know it was yours. Of course you didn't, I assured her. No one in the family knew. That was deliberate on my part. But why keep it secret? My mother pressed. We're your family. We would have been proud. I couldn't help the sharp laugh that escaped me. Would you? The same family who called cooking servants work? Who cut me off completely when I chose culinary school? Who, just minutes ago, were making snide comments about my life choices. My father cleared his throat. Now, Dara, that's unfair. We were concerned about your stability, your future. If we'd known you had this kind of business acumen. That's exactly my point, I interrupted. You couldn't respect my passion alone. It only has value to you now that it comes with success and status. At that moment, Chef Miranda approached our table. In her crisp whites with Miranda Torres, chef de cuisine embroidered on the breast, she made an impressive figure. Sorry to interrupt, Dara, she said, but the Matsuhisa party has arrived for their tasting, and Siva wants to confirm your interview for next week's feature. Also, your publisher called about the cookbook cover design. I nodded. Thank you, Miranda. Please tell them I'll be there shortly. As Miranda departed, I registered the growing amazement on my family's faces. Cookbook? Heather echoed. Coming out this fall with Knopf, I confirmed. 120 recipes with personal stories. Dara, my mother began, her voice taking on the coaxing tone she used when trying to manage a social situation. This is all so impressive. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped, supported you. The way you supported me when I needed it most? I asked quietly. By cutting me off completely? We thought it was a phase, my father protested. How were we to know you had this level of entrepreneurial spirit? You've clearly inherited my business sense. I felt a flash of anger at his attempt to claim credit for my success. I built this myself, I said firmly. Without your connections, your money, or your support. Bradley, who had been suspiciously quiet, suddenly perked up. A cookbook deal? That must come with a substantial advance. And this place, he gestured around appreciatively, his earlier criticisms forgotten. It must generate significant revenue. Do you have plans for expansion? Perhaps a restaurant group? I have some contacts in hospitality investment who might be interested. I couldn't help but laugh at the transparency of his pivot from condescension to networking opportunity. I'm doing quite well with my current advisors, but thank you, I said. Heather shot him a look of irritation before turning back to me. So, all this time, while I thought you were struggling, you were actually succeeding. Building all this. Yes, I said simply. And tonight, she continued, her voice hardening, you let us sit here criticizing your food, your wine list, your portion sizes, all while knowing it was yours? I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was still the family failure, I explained. And now I know. That seems manipulative, she snapped, but I could see the embarrassment behind her anger. More manipulative than asking how I could afford to eat here? Then suggesting I must be in debt or dating someone wealthy to afford a meal at this table. I countered. You weren't concerned about me, Heather. You were enjoying what you thought was your superiority. The restaurant had gradually emptied as we talked, the evening service winding down. Jose approached with a bottle. Your special reserve cognac, Ms. Dara, he said. For your investors' meeting. And Chef Miranda says the kitchen is ready whenever you are. Thank you, Jose, I replied. Please let Miranda know I'll be there in 10 minutes. As he left, I turned back to my stunned family. I have a business to run, I said, rising from my seat. Thank you for coming this evening. Dara, wait, my mother said quickly. Don't leave like this. We should celebrate your success. Perhaps we could all have brunch this weekend? Catch up properly. I looked at her, seeing for the first time not the intimidating figure of my childhood, but simply a woman trying to salvage her pride and position. I'll think about it, I said. But right now, I have investors waiting and a kitchen to oversee. As I turned to leave, Ethan stood up. Dara, he said, his voice quieter than the others. For what it's worth, this is incredible. What you've built here, it's remarkable. I'm sorry for not supporting you sooner. Of all the reactions, his felt the most genuine. I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement before walking away from the table where I had just changed the dynamics of my family forever. I had barely made it 10 steps when I heard the click of heels behind me. Turning, I found my mother hurrying to catch up, her perfectly composed facade beginning to crack. Dara, please, she said, lowering her voice. You can't just drop this revelation and walk away. We need to talk about this. I glanced toward the private dining room where my actual investors, a group discussing funding my second restaurant concept, were waiting. I have a meeting, Mother. Postpone it, she insisted. This is family. Family hasn't been a priority for you in 5 years, I replied, keeping my voice steady. My business commitments don't suddenly become optional because you finally decided my career is worthy of your attention. The rest of the family had followed her, creating an awkward cluster near the bar area. My father looked distinctly uncomfortable and used to not being in control of a situation. Heather's expression wavered between resentment and something that might have been respect. Perhaps we could continue this conversation tomorrow, my father suggested in his problem-solving business tone. Dinner at our place? We have much to discuss, including how we might help you expand, Bradley added eagerly. My firm specializes in... I don't need your help, I interrupted firmly. I didn't build this place to finally win your approval. I built it because this is what I love, what I'm good at. The fact that it's successful doesn't suddenly make my passion more valid than it was 5 years ago. No one is saying that, darling, my mother backpedaled. We're simply proud of what you've accomplished. Are you proud, Mother? Or are you relieved that my choices no longer embarrass you socially? Her flinch told me I'd hit close to home. That's unfair, my father interjected. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I corrected him. You wanted what aligned with your vision for me. There's a difference. Miranda appeared at my side, her presence a welcome support. The Haverford group is asking if you'll be joining them soon, she said quietly. 5 minutes, I promised her. As Miranda nodded and stepped away, I turned back to my family. I need to go. Dara, Heather stepped forward, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I owe you an apology. The things I said tonight, they were unkind. They were honest, I replied. That's the silver lining of this evening. I got to see exactly how you all view me when you think I'm struggling. That's not fair, Ethan said, joining the conversation. People make judgments based on the information they have. We didn't know. You didn't know I was successful, I clarified. But you did know I was pursuing something I loved. That should have been enough for my family to show basic respect. A heavy silence fell over the group. You're right, my father finally said, surprising me. We should have supported your passion regardless of its outcome. Coming from him, this admission was significant. Richard Mitchell didn't acknowledge mistakes easily. Where do we go from here? My mother asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice, another rarity. I took a deep breath, considering the question. Despite everything, these people were my family. The hurt they'd caused was real, but so was our shared history. Complete estrangement had never been my goal, just enough distance to build my own life without their judgment clouding my decisions. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But tonight has made one thing clear: if we're going to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be on different terms. I'm not the family failure seeking redemption. I'm a successful chef and business owner who deserves the same respect you'd give any other professional. Of course, my father agreed quickly. And that means no more comments about my life choices, No more unsolicited career advice and absolutely no attempts to network through my restaurant, I added, with a pointed look at Bradley, who had the grace to look embarrassed. About Heather's wedding, my mother began tentatively. What about it? I asked. We'd still like you to be there, Heather said, her voice softening. As my sister. Not as whatever we thought you were before tonight. I looked at her, trying to see past the years of competition and judgment. Despite everything, there had been good times too, secrets shared as children, supporting each other through our first heartbreaks, inside jokes no one else understood. I'll be there, I promised. Then, after a moment's consideration, I added, and if you'd like, I could host a dinner for the wedding party here at Maison. As my gift. Heather's eyes widened. You would do that? After how we've treated you. You're still my sister, I said simply. But to be clear, this isn't me seeking your approval. It's me offering something I'm proud of on my own terms. I understand, she said quietly. And I would be honored. A genuine smile, the first of the evening, passed between us. Now, I really do need to go, I said, gesturing toward the private dining room. Of course, my father nodded. Your business comes first. Not always, I corrected him. But tonight, yes. As they gathered their things to leave, I added, I'm free for brunch on Sunday. Not at your club, though. There's a small place in the East Village I think you should experience. We'll be there, my mother promised, looking relieved at this small opening. I watched them file out of the restaurant, their perspectives irrevocably changed. As the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath, feeling oddly lighter. Miranda approached again. Everything okay? Getting there, I replied. Family is complicated. Tell me about it, she laughed. My mother still introduces me as her daughter who works at a restaurant like I'm a teenage waitress at Denny's. I smiled, grateful for her understanding. Let's go talk spring menu. I have some new ideas I'm excited about. As we walked toward the kitchen, my sanctuary, my achievement, my true home, I realized that the most important revelation of the evening wasn't showing my family what I'd built. It was fully recognizing it myself. I had created this success on my own terms, regardless of their approval. And that knowledge was worth more than any validation they could ever offer. 2 weeks passed like a whirlwind. Spring menu planning, meetings with my publisher about the cookbook layout, and preliminary discussions about a potential second location kept me gratefully busy. But thoughts of that family dinner remained, surfacing in quiet moments, demanding reflection. Sunday brunch had gone surprisingly well. I'd taken my family to Alma's, a hole-in-the-wall gem run by a former colleague from my early days working the line. My parents had been visibly uncomfortable at first with the mismatched chairs and graffiti-decorated walls, but the food, unpretentious yet masterfully executed, had won them over. I never knew simple eggs could taste like this, my father had admitted, mopping up the last of his shakshuka with homemade sourdough. Small steps. Not a complete transformation, but an opening. Now, sitting at my usual table after closing time, I watched the staff complete their final duties. Jessica was counting the register while humming softly. Marcus and Jose were discussing wine pairings for tomorrow's private event. Miranda had left an hour ago after we'd finalized the spring menu revisions. My phone buzzed with a text from Heather, wedding planning nightmare. Florist just doubled their quote. Any chance you're free for coffee tomorrow? Could use some straight talk from someone who won't just tell me what I want to hear. I smiled slightly at this unexpected request for my opinion. Another small step. I texted back confirming a time and place. The relationship with my family was evolving into something I couldn't have predicted. Not the unconditional embrace I might have once craved, but something potentially more valuable, a measured respect between adults with different values and paths. My mother had called 3 times in the past 2 weeks, her usual formality softening into genuine questions about my work. My father had sent an article about female chefs breaking barriers in the industry. A silent acknowledgement that he was trying to understand my world. Even Ethan had reached out, asking if he could bring his children to see the kitchen sometime. "I want them to know they have options," he'd said. "That success doesn't have to look the same for everyone." These were fragile beginnings, not the dramatic reconciliation of a Hollywood movie. Real healing, I was learning, happens in quiet moments and small gestures, in the gradual rewriting of old patterns. The most significant change, though, wasn't in my family's perception of me, but in how I had finally stopped measuring my worth through their eyes. The validation I had once desperately sought from them now felt strangely unnecessary. I had proven myself not to them, but to myself. This realization had rippled through other areas of my life as well. I'd launched a mentorship program for young chefs from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering them the guidance and opportunity one had fought so hard to find. Every Saturday morning, the Maison kitchen transformed into a classroom for 8 aspiring culinary artists who reminded me of my younger self, passionate, determined, in need only of someone who believed in their potential. One of them, Zoe, had shown such promise that I'd offered her an apprenticeship. Watching her confidence grow with each new skill mastered brought a satisfaction different from any professional accolade I'd received. "Chef." Jessica's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "We're all set for closing. Anything else you need before we head out?" "No, thank you," I smiled. "You all did amazing work tonight." As the staff filed out, calling their goodnights, I remained at my table, notebook open to a blank page. I'd been trying to articulate the introduction to my cookbook, struggling to find words that captured my journey. In the quiet of the empty restaurant, I finally began to write. Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I spoke through flavors. When paths seemed unclear, I followed my palate. The dishes in this book are more than recipes. They're chapters of a life lived in pursuit of authenticity rather than approval. 5 years ago, I stood at a crossroads between expectation and passion. Choosing the latter cost me dearly at first, but ultimately led to the richest feast I could have imagined. Not merely in professional success, but in the discovery that true wealth isn't measured by external validation or material achievement, but by the courage to honor your own voice, even when it speaks in whispers against the shouts of doubt. I set down my pen, the words finally flowing freely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a difficult vendor negotiation, Heather's wedding planning drama, finalizing the cookbook introduction. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights of exhaustion, so complete I'd fallen asleep in kitchen corners during rare breaks. Burns and cuts that left scars still visible on my hands. Moments of doubt so intense I'd questioned everything. But I had persevered, not because I needed to prove my worth to others, but because I couldn't imagine living any other way. In choosing authenticity over approval, I'd found something more valuable than either success or family validation. I'd found myself. Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and following your own heart? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more true stories of resilience and triumph, and share with someone who might need a reminder that the most important approval comes from within. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, the most meaningful success is measured not by others' standards, but by the joy and purpose you find along your own path.